Thank you all for tuning in. The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people.
Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch III, coming to you live from the palatial remote studios in the beautiful city of Rome, Georgia. Joining me today from more than acceptable safe social distances are my guests, Robert White. How you doing, Robert?
I'm well and happy to be with you guys.
And Russ Thomas. How about you, Russ?
I am
We
great.
catch you on a good day?
Great indeed.
Awesome. Well, I usually start out the show with the same questions, and that is, who are you reading? So we'll start with Russ. Russ, who are you reading right now?
I'm reading the book of Ezekiel in the Bible.
Okay, The Wheel Within a Wheel.
That's right. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. I finished with Jeremiah, and that was more straightforward. But with the big book of Ezekiel, you've got a lot of all this other symbolic stuff that kind of goes over my head. My wife is more acclimated to that than I am, but it is what it is, and it's part of my quest of getting through the Bible yet another time in my life. So
yes,
go.
My parents do that every year. My father is a retired chaplain of the Army, Navy, and Marines, and the VA system, and we actually do another podcast together that we've been on a bit of a hiatus for, but we're going to be getting back to that. We have yet to tackle Ezekiel. Ezekiel is definitely hardcore and can be quite difficult for the layperson to get through. So I think we'll wait a while for that. But how about you, Robert? Who are you reading?
I'm bouncing back and forth between two books. One is for fun, but not really. It really is indicative of today's times, and that's Killing Witches by Bill O'Reilly, where he talks about the Salem witch trials and more importantly, the connection to some of the things that are happening in our culture today. And
True.
And I'm also almost finished with 10X, the strategic coach's Dan Sullivan's book about a radical shift in mindset.
Okay. Yeah, those are the best kinds of mind shifts. Is the radical ones. The ones that are slight shifts in mindset and in the way you do things seem to me to be the most difficult ones, because you're not dropping everything behind, you're just dropping some stuff and you're picking up a few little tweaks to do it. The 1% change, I think, is it ends up being the most difficult one. But
well,
yeah,
in my entrepreneurial journey, my third company and current one is called Extraordinary People. And I get a lot of feedback and questions about this word extraordinary. But extraordinary requires, and it's pretty consistent with Dan's approach, it requires a break, a significant shift. He talks about 10X. I talk about extraordinary. And if you give things that 1% improvement, it gives the busy mind the ability to resist even more strongly. If you surprise it, and that's kind of rooted in a lot of the martial arts, if you surprise it with movement, with a dramatic shift, your chances are much higher of getting what you want.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Let's see what to talk about. Russ, how did you, a Christian, get involved with Grant Cardone?
Well, the Bible says the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and so I would just have to say that it's under his orchestration. I started out in, I don't know, maybe the summer of 2022, watching a couple of programs by Robert Kiyosaki, who
Okay.
was real estate fellow and entrepreneur, and was watching. I read his, his Poor Man, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, so on years ago, and then I was watching his programs, and one day he had this character on by the name of Grant Cardone, and the two of them kind of clashed in mindset and in ways of doing things, and Robert, really didn't pull any punches at that interview and tell him that he disagreed with Grant's philosophy and his MO and so on. And so, I left it at that. And I guess I ended up getting one of Grant's books, how to create wealth, invested in real estate. And, then I thought, I want to see who this guy was. This was before I got the book, I think. And so I had to dial back on YouTube and find that interview of Robert's again with Grant, and got his name and then looked him up. One thing led to another. So I attended a seminar and read that book, etc., and went to an online class, etc. And so one day I got an email from Grant Cardone's office inviting me to pursue the possibility of becoming a licensed business coach of theirs. And so I thought, well, and some people these days, they call themselves serial entrepreneurs. Well, I call myself a hopeless entrepreneur. Can't help myself when I hear about a business. My antennas go up, my ears go up, and I just look around. And so this happened at that juncture when I was invited to pursue this, to look into this. So my wife and I sat down in front of our computer, did a Zoom call with Grant's man that's in charge of the licensee program. His name is Elliot, and we had a great chat. And I also I believe for a time that successful people are those who can really make a decision once they got the information that they need. In that call, I got the information that I need, shelled out the $25,000, signed up to become a licensed business coach. So that's how that happened. And he's always talking about, you owe it to yourself to be successful. You owe it to your family. You owe it to your community. You owe it to your church. And he talks a lot about spiritual aspects. But tell you the truth, I don't know how he and I align spiritually, with the Word of God, the Bible. But to me, it doesn't really matter, because that's not what I'm looking to him for.
Right.
It's business guidance, the business mindset, and the training and the coaching and that kind of thing. So I have not been able to slight what he's teaching and presenting along those lines. If we got into a religious conversation, it might be a whole different deal. But we're not in that. So it's immaterial to me. Most of the people that I rub shoulders with aren't what I would call, born again Christians. So whatever it is, so that's how that all happened, is just kind of weaved my way into it. Everybody's got a story that lines up with him, but he's changed my mentality and thinking. And I'm 75 years old. You know what? I've been in the business world for 50 years, and I wish I had that stuff then that I have now. And so all I can do now is offer myself and my experience and the training through Grant to other people, help them avoid what's happened to me 50 years. So.
Well, that's what we should all be doing, is trying to help the next group of people avoid the pitfalls we fell into.
Yep, indeed.
But no, I got turned off of Grant pretty early. Some people tried to get me into, kind of got me into the sales program that he had, and some of his people tried to get me sucked into their personality tests and Scientology and all that. And I'm like, nope, if that's where this is going, then forget about it for me. And
if that would have happened to me, but it's not happened. It's strictly business. Yeah,
that's
anyway.
good. That's good. Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't want to lose you.
Maybe they learned, something from you and from, similar circumstances. They said, we better just keep these two subjects separate.
Yeah. No kidding. But and so Robert, you teach leadership, right? Did I get that right?
I do that based on life experience and study and all of that. Yes, but I generally work with teams. That often leads to kind of a form of coaching for the senior people, but it's really it's really done normally in a group.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm planning on doing a group thing, hopefully later this year, in what I refer to as ethical leadership, which is a system of 8 actionable behaviors, if I may be so jargony, that it's all designed to help bring the team and the community together with the leader and make a uniform whole. With bringing together everybody's strengths to iron out the weaknesses and whatnot. But yeah, no, that's great. What would you call your theory of or your process of leadership?
Well, it's based on failure, mine, and many years ago, and what I learned from that. But I believe that the only unique role of a leader is to facilitate the creation, the communication, and the maintenance of purpose, vision, values, and strategic intent. That everything else can and should be delegated. If you're really in many of the businesses that I work with are small to medium size, and there the leader is doing everything.
Right.
And there's a progression there if they're going to get really into great amount of growth and profitability, and they have to stop doing everything and delegate a lot more. But it's certainly challenging quite often. I was in China recently, or from 2015 to 2020, and I did something. I did something I have not done in my life and career, is a lot of public speaking. So over 100,000 people I was in front of over that 6 years. And one of the things that I did was I started asking people questions that were coming up for me in these talks. You spend 30 minutes or so building some trust, hopefully, and get people to be responsive. And then I would ask them, how many of you have been betrayed in life or in business? And I'm relatively sure that 2 of you would know the answer to that. It was 100%. And now maybe I missed, these audiences were from 2 to 3,000 usually. Maybe I missed hands going up, but it seemed to me it was 100%. Said, yeah, I've been betrayed. And then we talked a bit about how to handle that. And the other question was, how many of you have been estranged from a family member? Or are currently estranged from a family member? And that number is 70% about, and again, these are rough numbers.
Right. So, but I can believe those numbers.
So on one hand, the leader needs to be, from my perspective, extremely aware and communicating about purpose, about vision, about values, about strategic intent. But at the same time, he or she is a human being dealing with life, with being estranged from a family member and the pain of that, or being betrayed by somebody probably important to you, and having those feelings, or feeling loss or hurt. And so, it's one thing to have that wonderful theory that my work is based on. It's another thing to realize that these are human beings that we all are working with.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it can be so important to create a business environment that facilitates the opposite of those things. That it creates an environment where you don't want to betray another, and you don't want to be estranged. You want to connect with them on a deep level, because that's the area that we can generally control. as the business environment. My father and I, we worked on a project to do ethical leadership for families as well, and so that'll come along again before too much longer. But yeah, you need leadership in families, but generally speaking, we can't control other people's families, but we can control the work environment,
As leaders.
Yes, as leaders.
My experience is you can't control your own family either, but you can contribute into it.
True.
Robert, I have a question for you about leadership. The concept of leading from behind, is that a viable style of leadership? What do you think of that? This is not to make an argument. I'm just really curious about it.
I have met a few people over the years that do that and do it successfully. I think as a broad idea to promote to many people, it's probably not workable. And I that's what I sort for is something workable? Is it actionable? Can we actually do this? Can we make progress with it? And I think leading from behind is so subtle, and it takes a certain kind of person to do it. So I don't think it would not be something I would broadly recommend personally.
I suppose if the leader or the manager or whatever has been able to create processes and instill his vision, his mentality, his goals, his values into those people, then it maybe is a little easier because they're fortified with part of him, so to speak, as opposed to not. Wouldn't you say?
Well, I'm a big promoter, and interestingly, I build a lot of my work, by the way, Bill, around 8 principles. So that number 8, that magical number 8 is there. And they are behavioral, by the way, in addition to being attitudinal. And but I believe that something there's been a sea change in terms of working with people in organizations. As recently as, let's say, 20 or 30 years ago, really good managers, if you think about the books that were published at that time, the courses that were taught, the emphasis in universities, it was all on management, not leadership.
Right.
Can you organize things? Can you plan? Can you control? Kind of the essence of management.
Right.
And when change was reasonably ordered and slow, that worked marvelously. We don't have to do a long philosophical discussion here about the pace of change. It is dizzying. It is so rapid in technology and how families are structured, in communication, in our politics, in our academia. The change is maddening. It's so fast. And so what that calls for, in my way of looking at the world, is leadership, is people making decisions at whatever level they are. I've been asking a question with groups quite often. I'll ask I ask people to write down or think about 3 leaders that they admire. And, it's the usual suspects. Some people focus on religious figures from history or even currently, some on politics, some on business, and people that are their heroes, the leaders that are in popular culture. And then I ask, how many of you chose you as one of the leaders you admire? And the answer to that question 100% of the time is 0. And yet that's what we are all looking for. If you've called any customer service desk recently, I think there's been some real progress made in that area. But, what you get is people that are not leaders. And you can say, well, they're kind of minimum wage or slightly above that, and they shouldn't have to be a leader. I'd say that they do. And when you have the absolute delight of calling into some major company with an issue, with a problem, and that person on the phone solves that problem for you, doesn't go check with the boss, doesn't read something from a screen, but actually works with you to get the problem solved. That's
Right.
I don't think we often don't think of that as leadership, but it actually is broadly shared leadership at all levels of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are a lot of different ways to get that buy-in, Russ, to get everyone involved in leadership. I mean, I have a methodology to do it, and you guys do too, I'm sure. But I think that's the key, is to get the maximum buy-in, to get the maximum number of people owning it, whatever the purpose, vision, and values are. That they own it, they can communicate it, and more importantly, they walk their talk, they live it.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
well, it's important that at all levels, like you said, to put your all into whatever it is you're doing. Just because you're only getting paid minimum wage now doesn't mean you're not affecting someone else's life. I remember a time I had gone into an office supply store like Office Depot or Office Max or one of those places, and I had to return something, and I was in line at customer service, and the guy in front of me was being a total jerk. This was the worst thing that had ever happened to him, and he laid into that poor girl like she was a whipping post, and it was just awful. And I was preparing myself to get it from her. But she had taken, she'd basically, when he left, it was gone. And she treated me as though I was the first customer of the day, and she'd had a great night's sleep. And I told her so, that I was amazed at her ability to do that, and take ownership of the situation, and do the best she could to help the person, and then leave the negatives behind. And I think that's just so, in so many places, isn't taught, isn't encouraged, and certainly isn't taken by the people who are working these minimum wage and slightly above jobs. A guy who's been on the show, a guest who's been on the show several times, Richard Blank of Costa Rica's call center. He's
Amazing
got
guy.
some great, he's so cool. I've had him on like 3 or 4 times. But I got to get to Costa Mesa. That's just all. Costa Rica. Costa Mesa. Sorry, I used to live down the street from Costa Mesa in California. His way of doing things and teaching his staff how to act is just such a template that could be used by so many other organizations. And so definitely.
Gee, that girl you were just describing, it'd be kind of interesting to know if she had been trained in that vein, or if it was just her being the way she was.
Yeah.
Now, my wife would be that way right out of the box. That's just how she is. But is it something that can be trained and instilled upon somebody? You might say, well, this guy barks at you, and you may go home and kick your cat, but
right.
You better treat the next customer with the utmost care, because that's what you're here for. And so there's can it be trained? Can it be inbred in a person to be able to let that kind of thing run off their back, like water on a duck's back, basically? What do you think?
I think it's probably a combination of natural inclination and training. A lot of people can have it naturally, but if they're not encouraged to use that ability, I think it kind of disappears into the background. If it's not appreciated, then why should I make that effort?
Look, there's a lot of research and life experience that tells us that you can train for skills, you can train for attitudes, you can train for behaviors. You cannot train for values. That if people grew up in an atmosphere of abuse, of non-connection, of distance between people, you put them into a customer-facing job, you're looking for trouble, because you cannot shift. In my experience, and the research proves it out, you cannot train for values. You cannot educate for values. They are rock solid. You can have people become more aware of them and work around them sometimes. But you can, in an organization, if you got somebody who's violating your values, they're going to be doing the same thing with customers. They're going to be doing it with colleagues, and they're going to be setting up a toxic environment for everybody.
Yeah. Time to send them down the road.
Yes,
unfortunately.
Years ago, I lived for a long time in Japan, and we were dealing with a preteen son who loved horses and was struggling with growing up in Japan. He was struggling with being an American, and so we bought a ranch in Northern California, and I had previously lived in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, so I had a bit of the knowledge of that culture on the coast. And then I bought this ranch in it was north and east of Sacramento in the gold country, and it's like two different countries. And what I found out is that in terms of values, there were companies there. GE had a huge operation building these CT scanners and things like that just outside of Sacramento. But there were so many medium-sized companies doing something in the tech field, but they were doing the manufacturing part of it, not so much the software and all that sexy stuff. And they were hugely successful because people were hiring other people from the Midwest, and that whole culture in inland California was Midwestern. I felt so at home. That's where I grew up, but the values of the people were that. You talk. I grew up in Wisconsin. Next door is Minnesota, and so kind of the joke is that people are Minnesota nice. Maybe you've heard that expression, and Wisconsin nice is very closely aligned to that. But if you're being around people that are nice, life is a lot easier.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
And people take care of each other, and there's a neighborliness and all of that I never saw in coastal California. So that's a values piece, and companies found that the best way to recruit, because I'm there as a kind of a holiday person. My son and my former wife lived there for the summers, and I would come for a week at the beginning of the summer and a week at the end of the summer. But I like to observe people. I like to get out in the culture. And what I felt so at home. But those companies, the way they were recruiting was they would say to their team, we're going to pay a bonus if you can bring somebody from the Midwest, basically.
Wow.
If you can bring one of your friends, one of your relatives into this company, we're going to bonus you, and that's what we want to create. It was their way of creating values. Do you guys know about the big orange trucks, Schneider Transfer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see them on the road all the time here in Colorado. That company is actually headquartered in the town I grew up in, Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I've done a bit of study of it. Go Pack. And, that company has had solid growth for many, many years. And what's interesting about them is that if I went in and did a lecture on purpose, vision, and values, and what I do, they'd nod off. They'd be going to sleep. They have lived that long before I ever thought of the idea. And
interesting.
One of the ways they've maintained values is they in their executive ranks are 100% former graduates of West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, and the Coast Guard Academy. They only hire former military officers, because what you get when you do that The good news is you get strategy and tactics and values and
Mm-hmm.
principles that they live from. And Bill, it's not like you know, talking about ethics. That's
Yeah.
a solid part of a military education.
Absolutely.
Now, the bad news is they have rampant alcoholism,
Right.
and I don't know about currently. My latest information is 7 or 8 years old, but at one point they had 11 AA groups
Wow.
in the company.
Hmm.
You know, it was, you know, different focus of the AA groups,
Yeah.
but 11 different groups nationwide. So that's the downside, because a lot of officers, unfortunately, you know, they have in the military, what I learned, and I'm not a veteran, is there's periods of intense action that I
Mm-hmm.
can't even imagine.
Mhm.
But then there are moments of nothing.
Right.
And you go to the officers club and here comes
Right.
the alcohol, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that, again, they built this huge successful company based on purpose, vision, and values by hiring only people with military academy experience.
Interesting. We're from Wisconsin also. I'm from Madison. And when we moved to Florida in 1998, we noticed quite early on that people down here just didn't have much of a work ethic or a service related ethic like what we were used to up in the upper Midwest. So, Robert, I know what you're talking about. And my wife and I had actually toyed with the idea how neat it would be able to set up an organization where we could do seminars and teach people, I don't know, how to be nice, how to be energetic, how to be committed to their work, how to go the extra, that kind of stuff, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
we never stumbled, we didn't pursue it real heavily, and we didn't have a platform and so on. But then when Grant Cardone came along with the Cardone University, followed by the coaching, that kind of came back to mind as like, wow, we could get into that whole thing from that particular avenue. But yeah, everybody says how important the mindset is, and man, if we don't have that mindset, if we don't have our heads screwed on straight, it's not going to be a good result.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting that you talk about how the values are just different in the Midwest, and because I lived in Southern California for almost my entire life, except for a break to Japan for a year and some time traveling the country as my father was doing temporary active duties around in the nation for the Navy, and being so used to that just being the way things get done. You know, it's like, no, you don't get good customer service. No, they might not speak English. No, they might not be nice, and all that kind of stuff. And now I live in southeastern Missouri, down in the Boot Heel, and it's day and night, the difference. You know, everybody's nice, everybody's looking out for each other. You know, you can get help at Walmart. You can get useful help at Walmart. You know, it's like, wow, that's just amazing. You know, people know where stuff is, and they know where stuff is, and they're happy to help you get to it. You know, and people remember you. My pharmacist, you know, I drive up to the thing, and they still have to ask me about my birthday, but they're like, all right, Bill, what's you know, it's like, we got your pills ready for you, and all that, and you know, the cashiers at the Walmart, you know, they remember if I used the electric cart the previous time, or if I was walking with my cane, you know, and just just like, okay, you know, that's just awesome, taking the time to make note of people,
Right.
and yeah.
Do you think
You
that
know?
has a function to do with the number of people in the environment in the area? I mean, when there's 100,000 people in a small radius, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to maybe the town you're referring to, is that going to breed just, I don't have time for you, move on, Top Shop, let's move on to the next thing.
It could be. It could be. I hadn't considered it being a function of the numbers of the population. Because Santa Ana is like 250,000 people, and Malden is like 4,000 people. So it's there is definitely a big difference in the number of people in the area. So it could be. It could be. Of course, the one thing that I don't like is that everything's so far away now. It's like it used to be the grocery store was down. Within a mile, I could choose 5 grocery stores. Now I have to drive an hour and a half to get to Sam's Club.
Wow. Because the local stores couldn't make money anymore.
Right.
Competitive with Sam's Club.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yep. So, but so we just make plans. We have a huge ice chest in the back of the car, and we do a monthly trip.
You adapt.
Or you can
adapt.
You can have stuff delivered too. Compliment.
That's true.
UPS and Amazon and
Yeah, they do that. You don't have to leave the house much these days.
Right.
That's going to be that's an interesting thing. It would be an interesting thing to look into is how that's affecting customer service, because people don't have to leave the house so much to go and get things, because so much can be delivered today.
Well, and not only that, is just the basic communication.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't face to face. They're, I've joked about 4 kids sitting at a table, and they're all sitting there with their phones, and guess what they're doing? They're texting. But who are they texting? They're texting each other in that group of 4 instead of looking at each other and having a verbal conversation. That's kind of a joke, but it may not be too terribly far from reality. That we don't have the interpersonal relationships that were prevalent when we were younger.
Right. At least not in the same form. But one of the interesting side effects of technological communication is that our distance is greater now. Because if we had to do this in person, I don't think the show could do it, because we've got you, Russ, in Florida, and you, Robert, in Colorado, and me in Georgia.
Yeah.
And I've had people on the show in other countries. Richard in Costa Rica, Braca in Israel. I had one from Finland, and I've had a couple in England, and just around the world. And it's crazy the distance we can communicate over now.
But at least we're looking at each other, talking face to face from a distance. We still have that going for us.
Right.
Last night I went to an event honoring one of my former clients, which is why I was invited, and who has become a good friend. And he experienced 2 radically difficult health challenges in the last 3 years, and has recovered. And this group put together this acknowledgement of him. It was a wonderful event. But one of the things that came up for me around that is that in our culture today and in our work, one of the wonderful things is all this technology like Zoom and Riverside and all of these, and the distancing thing, and there have been 1,300,000 people that have graduated from these first 2 companies that I founded and led, and 85% of our revenue was on personal growth, as opposed to corporate culture change, which is all that I do now. But in those programs with over 1 million people, we do an exercise called Ways We Avoid. How people avoid being present. Whatever they're going to learn, whatever they're going to do in life, how they can become their own trainer. is simply to be awake. And the great teachers throughout history have taught that. They've taught, be aware, be awake, learn from your environment, learn from the people around you. So we do this section on how do we avoid. And for many, many years, you'd flip chart this and people shout out how they avoid. So, the popular ones were things like television for years. That was a way we avoid. We zone out by getting in front of the box. Or shopping as a way to avoid. Some people even use exercise as a way to avoid, by the way. So for years, there was kind of a pattern. No matter what the group, there was a pattern. Today, guess what? The number one way we avoid is? It is these things,
Yeah.
So we step into an elevator, and instead of connecting, even with a smile, to the people around us, we take out our phone.
Right.
That moment of uncomfortableness in an elevator when you're with strangers. Russ, this kind of speaks to your thing about running and training to have people be nice. I think it's destined for failure.
I think you're right.
Because it's
people
values
that way.
It's values based. And so I'm on all of those personality tests and observing myself, I'm an introvert. Now I've spoken to audiences from 20 to 8,000, and I'm comfortable in front of a room when I've got an objective, but I still go back to my room and watch ESPN2 on television, and order room service, and I'm very happy being alone. That's a personality trait that's pretty deep in me. But I think that this temptation to turn to this thing is so strong. Yeah. Plus, all of these people, it's all the algorithms are set up to hook us and get us to watch the next screen. So we've got technology arrayed against us. We've got our own tendencies arrayed against us. And we avoid noticing the people around us. Yeah. And Russ, you're exactly right about that. 4 young people around a table texting each other, or they're texting somebody else. Yeah. So they're not present to the group.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And now we can talk about artificial intelligence too. So that probably opens up a whole nother point of conversation of where is that taking us as human beings, as personal, supposedly social creatures.
Yeah, I believe that, the two words that come up for me when I look at the culture, but more specifically at my corporate clients, are meaning and purpose. And what's missing for many, many people, and particularly younger people, is a sense of meaning and purpose for their lives. And, work is at least 1/3 of our lives, let's say, just roughly 1/3. If work can contribute to helping people gain more meaning and more of a sense of purpose in their lives, I think that's an incredible gift that's available for entrepreneurs and people building companies or building nonprofit organizations, is that if you can help people get a sense of meaning and purpose for their lives, boy, you've gone way beyond a paycheck. Yeah. You really made a contribution.
Right. Yeah. There is more to just making $1 million. Purpose behind it is, what awesome thing are you going to do with that $1 million that is going to benefit your family, your community, your country, so on and so forth. Purpose behind that, and not just, I want to make all this money. What are you going to do with it? That's the important part, is purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Bill, I'm going to introduce you to someone you might want to have on your podcast. And
okay.
His name is Eric Donovan, and he's one of the army of financial advisors in the U.S. Seems like there's one on every street corner, kind of thing.
Pretty much.
And he was with one of the big companies. I think he was with Schwab, and in their wealth division, where they deal with very wealthy people and big numbers. And and he lives his life from Christian principles, and which is
Mhm.
how I connected up with him, frankly. And he's built this incredibly successful financial advisory firm that he owns down in some little town in Louisiana, of all places.
Hmm.
And yet he works with clients all over the world. And the key to what he does is he says to them, if all that you want to do is get richer, because he deals with rich people, if you just want to get richer, I'm not your guy.
Right.
But if you'd like to get richer and at the same time have more money available for philanthropy, let's rock and roll. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But he's an incredibly magnetic speaker, a guest. He's a great guest. He's going to make you look good.
Okay.
And so I'll set up an introduction. But that idea he's made a lot of money by teaching people how to use their money more effectively. That money brings, my experience was, and I got caught up in the money thing personally at one point. I had the big house in Aspen and my own jet and a whole bunch of the things that the poor kid from the wrong side of the track does when he gets money. I did them all.
Went nuts. Yep.
But
he flew around with John Denver, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, you and John Denver were pals, weren't you?
We were. I miss him a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, but John was an example. I met him originally. We were using his music in our trainings for years, illegally, by the way. I'll confess now. But I had never met him. And we published a book, and I sent him a copy of the book. I didn't know him. That kind of thing. Like, I was a fan. And then the reason I met him was because WinStar, his nonprofit foundation, he was contributing $25,000 a month into WinStar to pay the bills.
Wow.
Month after month after month. And this was after buying a multi-million-dollar piece of land and gifting it to the foundation. He spent a ton of money on that thing. And I came in and helped fix that, I guess, along with some other really dedicated people. But he's an example in that, he was co-founder of the Hunger Project. He was the first, really the first entertainer to go to Russia and talk about peace and what are we, one of his famous songs, what are we making weapons for?
Right.
It goes on. And I learned a lot from John. It also was a problem for him. It cost him 2 marriages. Frankly, it was central to ending 2 marriages from women that he loved and who loved him. But he always saw his life. Yeah, he got paid a lot of money to do what he did, but he always saw his life as contributing to the whole, to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, I don't know if it's just media, but we're seeing some wonderful examples of that right now, if we look for them. It's easy to look for bad things today. And media, what is the line? If it bleeds, it leads.
It leads. Yep.
There's plenty of that. But boy, if you start, and I'm the Christian that doesn't go to church. And I don't read the Bible as often as I should, so I'm different than you guys in that regard. But it's kind of a Christian and Judeo-Christian worldview to sort for the positive, to look for what's working. And in companies, if you can shift the spirit in a company to looking for what are we doing that's working. Because there's plenty of attention on what's not working. That's what gets, I think that's a major gift we can give to organizations and to individual coaching clients like Russ worked with. It's a gift to humanity if we get people looking at what's working. What do I have to celebrate? What are the blessings that come my way?
Yeah. Yeah. Believe it or not, the world does not revolve around each one of us individually,
Nope.
as much as we would like to think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking now that about what you've both said, and yeah, I think the question needs to be asked by everyone: to what end am I doing this? Whatever it happens to be, whether it's getting rich or famous. I mean, there are all these kids who just want to be famous, and it's like, to what end? What is it that you're going to do with that?
Yeah.
Once you have the billion followers, what is it you're going to what are you going to produce
Yeah.
as a point of
What
that?
do you want to lead them into?
Right.
A
Right.
benefit of value.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I had one would-be influencer on the show not too long ago, but yeah, he wanted to help kids who were who had been in abusive environments, and help that way. But yeah, to what end? What is your...
Well,
Yeah.
the teaching, I mean, our
Yeah.
work when
You
we
know,
work with
I went
groups
to college.
around, when we work around purpose and for an organization or for personally, is it's kind of an oversimplified way to talk about it, but the 4 levels of purpose. The first one is is foundational, and that's survival, handling food, clothing, shelter, that kind of thing, and also
Right.
ego survival, and all that, the Maslow's pyramid stuff. But the next level up is maintenance, that you figure out in your life or in your company how to handle survival with some kind of a system, with some kind of performance, with some kind of action. So, and then the third level is leisure. Now, by leisure, we don't mean laying on a beach somewhere or playing pickleball every day, but rather that your work and your life become play. That there's a flow to it, there's an enjoyment to it. And then the highest level of purpose is contribution. It's making sure that whatever unique role that God put you here to play. I have a friend, a guy that we were doing this seminar for people of faith who run businesses, and I met this wonderful guy named Arjun Sen. He's an India native who's very, very successful in the U.S. And he's the former chief marketing officer for Papa John's Pizza, as an example. So, I mean, he's had some big jobs. And Arjun talks about how everyone is one of one. That our fingerprint is unique out of the approaching 8 billion people on the planet, but our personality is unique. There's all this uniqueness to us as human beings, and that our job is to figure out how to express that into the world. And that might be the contribution I think that the 3 of us are attracted to. That feeling that we've contributed to people and organizations to be more alive, more fulfilled, more successful, all of those things. But at any given time, we have to pay attention to all 4 levels of purpose, of survival, of maintenance, of leisure, but ultimately, I think we've really progressed when a bigger percentage of our life is grounded in contribution and what we're giving back. And sometimes that's money, sometimes that's our time, sometimes that's our talent, our knowledge, our wisdom. But that's been the progression for me, and just watching myself, noticing myself, and how I show up in the world. I want more of it to be coming from contribution.
Good deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got, at the same time, you've got people who are into that giving, into that contributing of their resources, which happens to be time and energy, effort, and so on and so forth. And they say, well, money's not important to me. I'm into giving and helping other people. But the problem with that is unfortunately, it takes money to live. And it seems to be taking more money every year to live this at the same level that it did the year before. And so these people, well-intentioned as they are, they lose sight of the fact that they need money. And the more the merrier, the more they can do with it. It's been said that the majority of divorces they take place because of financial problems. Well, guess what? Those problems are not having too much money. You know what I mean? And so there's definitely a place for money, for finances in our lives, even as we've reached that top level, as we still need the dough in order to go, in order to give of ourselves. And I believe that we have a responsibility as husbands, as fathers, as grandfathers. We have a responsibility to leave a legacy and an inheritance to our children and our children's children, like the Bible indicates. It's not just to be over when we're done, but we need to be able to leave something that continues on. And money definitely helps that whole thing.
Yeah. Of course, the numbers say that what is it? 80% of generational wealth is gone by the third generation these days, and
Well, you know why? Because those that were the recipients of it were idiots.
Right.
They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to treat it. They don't know how to invest it. They're idiots, and they're just living for today. What is the deal with people that win the lottery? We hear about, these guys win this big lottery, and in a couple of years they're as broke as they were before, or worse, because they did not take the time to learn how to learn how to be rich, basically, and use it. So it's not the money's fault. No. It's the parents and the grandparents who failed to teach the ones coming after them the importance, the value, the benefit, and how to treat it, how to work with it, and that kind of thing. So I think you're very right about that statistic, Bill.
Yeah.
Woe be to those idiots that let it slip through their fingertips.
Yeah. Well, Robert, the guy you were talking about, Eric, I'm sure he could back that up. That there's really very little financial education going on in the United States, at least, across the board. People just don't know how to handle money at any level.
Yep.
I don't want to speak for Eric, but just personally, I semi-retired to Aspen for 12 years, and I was around a lot of very, very rich people. And so I wouldn't use the term idiots, Russ, personally.
Uh-oh.
I think what it is, it's about their values, not about
holding that thought.
It's not about their ability to think. Some very smart people make horrible decisions around wealth. But it's
that's the truth.
What's missing is an education in values, and I saw that. I've seen that in my own family, and I have very few regrets in my life, but that's one of them. Is I didn't do a good job of passing along my values, what I learned growing up poor about money, and I didn't do that with all of my children. The younger ones, yes; the older ones, no. And they're paying the price for that. And I, as a parent, you want your kids to win in life. So that's a problem for me also. I did at one point, I had, 240 people in 7 countries. So I wasn't doing many trainings myself. I would do one per year in the summertime in Aspen, and it was on legacy. people that were already graduates of one or more of our programs. And I'd meet with them in that beautiful setting for a week. And a good friend of mine for many, many years, a guy named Stuart Matlins, had a huge, successful business career and then quit, had kind of a religious renewal in his life as he got to about 50. And he created the largest publisher of Jewish books in the world, called Jewish Lights, and which he sold a couple of years ago. And he's now down in Florida, by the way, enjoying his life a bit. But Stuart, when he heard about my program on legacy, he said, we have a book about that. And he sent me a copy of it. I think the title is Jewish Wills, WILLS, and How to Prepare Them. So it's a how-to book. And what I learned from the book is that in some sects of Judaism, you write two different wills. One is the kind that we are most familiar with. Here's what to do with the house and the jewelry and the money and all of that. The other will is the values that you want to pass along to succeeding generations.
Oh, wow.
And it's a marvelous book and a marvelous idea. And they give actual examples. Here's what I learned about life that might be valuable to you. And I think that's really the key, is to assume that people are reasonably intelligent. So they're not idiots. They just act like idiots because they're on shaky ground when it comes to values. Money for me is clear for me. It represents freedom. So I can do what I want, support what I want, go where I want, or not go if I've got the financial wherewithal. Bill, on my screen, your picture is frozen. So you're a handsome fellow, but less animated than you normally are.
No, it happens, but Riverside continues recording, and it'll reassemble everything when it's done,
and then
it'll be fine.
All right,
yes.
We'll all look good. That's just wonderful.
Yes, we'll all look good.
I see my screen up in the upper right-hand corner. It says 99% uploading.
Yep.
So it's taken from me and shooting it up to you, evidently.
Yeah. Well, actually, it shoots it up to the cloud first, and then I'll download it later. But yeah, it's an interesting way that it does things. I've really enjoyed the quality of the recordings. There are some limitations to it, but the quality's been really nice. But yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think money does represent freedom for most people, probably. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy you a big boat, and you can sail up to happiness. But it does, not having to worry about the bills and on the more serious side of it, it's like having the money to pay for your shelter and your food and your utilities and whatnot. Definitely feels a lot better than having to worry about those things.
Exactly.
And so maybe it doesn't buy happiness, but it buys relief. Yeah. From a lot of things. And then when you get extras of it, then it does really represent
the way I heard that money doesn't buy happiness phrase is that, yeah, money doesn't buy happiness, but at least with it you can have your problems and stuff. In the boat or in your plane or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
So, Robert, you were talking about financial education a little while ago, and I interviewed a woman just the other day that she is she's working on a program for high school juniors and seniors to be able to teach them financial intelligence, basically financial principles, because they don't really teach a whole lot of that in school these days, whether it's public school, private school, homeschool. It's hopefully at least it's the reading, writing, and arithmetic. But so she's on a mission to create a book, and she's doing it in a digital format so the kids can be using their phones instead of talking to each other. They'll be learning something on this digital platform. And so it was different, as the gist of my interviews, Robert. She wasn't like in business like you and me and other people that I interview, and yet she started a new business trying to get this book going and this product out to market and stuff. And I think she's on a very noble quest to be able to influence today and tomorrow's kids that are, tomorrow's leaders, that unless somebody teaches them, they're not going to know much about money and how it's made and how to do a budget, how to balance a checkbook, and, that kind of thing. So that was an interesting interview. When I start these things, I never know how they're going to go because I don't really, vet people in advance. And it's just like, tell me your story and let's get going. Well, that was her story and we got going, and I hope she does very well at it. I told her the big challenge she's up for is marketing, of course, because nobody knows about her product. And she said some of the states are going to be mandating this kind of training, this kind of classware. And so that can be a ready-made market, but nevertheless, she's got to make the inroads to get those school districts aware of her. But financial information, education, training at that young level, I think, is pretty good.
Part of the problem is that money is such a taboo subject. You don't talk about how much money somebody is making. You don't talk about, your financial plans. You don't talk about what you own. People just don't talk about their finances to begin with. I mean, it's like people not wanting to talk about death and legacy planning. It's just it's taboo. It's forbidden, and
that's a sad deal. It's a slam against the parents, I guess, for not willing to step out of that. You can talk that way about sex education too. Well, I learned it not in the alley, but down the street what this was and that was, and because it's just a taboo thing. And some of these people, they may not want to talk about it because they don't know anything about it themselves, adults.
True. True.
Whatever.
It's a multi-generational problem.
Yeah. Boy, we have sure hit some philosophical subjects, haven't we?
Well, I do. My intent with the show is to let people get to know my guests in a slightly different way, because I don't want to be asking the same exact questions everybody else asks on their podcast.
You are unique.
But we have been going at this for a while. We're over the hour mark, but and always want to leave the people wanting more. So this might be a good place to stop.
Go, Robert.
The emphasis in my life and in the people that I'm working with right now is basically putting myself out of business would be one way to talk about it. And that is to encourage people to spend quiet time with self. And that can be prayer, that can be meditation, that can be a walk in the woods, that can be playing with grandchildren, but to do so with an awareness, a listening to yourself. I'm personally grounded in my Christian faith, but it can be any faith or no faith. If you take time in this crazy, chaotic world that we have created to be with yourself and listen, and then act. Of course, you got to get up in the morning and act on that, on what occurs to you. But that's the emphasis in my life. I usually choose a word that I'm kind of working on for the year. This year it's resilience. And I think the way to be more resilient is to spend structured time with yourself, with that swim, with that walk, with that prayer, with that meditation practice, whatever it is that quiets the mind and gets us to really be more connected to our authentic selves and the authentic selves in the people around us. So that's my kind of coaching approach to myself and to my clients this year.
Well, coming from business world and the training world and the coaching world of Grant Cardone and his methodology, that's where my focus is to leave people with a desire to say, by golly, I just had a meeting with myself, Robert, and I have come to the conclusion that I can accomplish more in this life. I can do more. I can make more money. I can affect more people. I can do all of that stuff, but I don't know how to do it. And that's where, like, I would come in and to help somebody in that regard.
Right.
We in my business years ago was on my own, and so I'm a big proponent for training and coaching and rehearsing and drilling and role play and all that kind of stuff. And people need to realize that they need help. And that's probably my biggest roadblock of talking with people is, I say, what do you do, Russ? Well, I help people increase their income 15 to 30% in 90 days or less. Oh, that's nice. And the answer I would really love to hear would be, man, I would really like to achieve that. Can you help me? But so many people are stuck with average. They're complacent with the mediocre, with average. And I say that average is the enemy to great.
Yep.
So get out of here. In your next conversation with yourself, realize that you can be more.
Yep. Get out of the quest for mediocrity.
Yep, indeed. What a drag.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. It's been a great show, and
thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank our producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd also like to thank my special guests, Robert White and Russ Thomas. Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered. Be sure to tune in next time when my special guest will be Russell Van, author of the Ghetto Bastard trilogy of books, and Jenma Nightwalker, founder of the Crimson Ivory Studio. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.